What's up, guys? Justin here with my top waiver wire ads heading into week 15 of NFL Fantasy Football, which is likely your first round of the playoffs, so let's get that win. Let's start it off with quarterbacks that I'd be looking to add this week. Aaron Rodgers is coming off a top 12 performance against the Ravens, throwing for over 280 yards and a touchdown. He also added a rushing touchdown, which was his first in about 3 years. He gets the Dolphins next week, who are bottom 10 against fantasy quarterbacks, so this is a good spot for the GOAT this week. Trevor Lawrence has been sneaky good in fantasy this season, posting a top 15 performance in 8 of his last 9 weeks. T-Law gets the Jets next week, who give up about 17 points to quarterbacks. Now this is right in the middle of the league, but Lawrence is a streaming candidate for week 15. Jacoby Brissett draws an extremely difficult matchup next week, taking on the Houston Texans, who are one of the worst possible matchups for the position, and they just shut down Patrick Mahomes on Sunday Night Football. Though, in a tough matchup this past weekend, Jacoby put up 19 fantasy points against the Los Angeles Rams. He probably won't finish as a top 12 player in week 14, but he has been great for fantasy as he continues to throw the ball for more than 40 times a game. I didn't feel good about it, but I told you to start JJ McCarthy this week in a good matchup, and he came through with 20 fantasy points. In week 15, he gets the Dallas Cowboys, who allow the most fantasy points to the position. JJ could be another streaming option next week, and he gets the Giants the week after, so maybe he could stack a few good games in a row. Shedeur Sanders just put up the QB2 performance against the Titans as he threw for 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he added 30 yards on the ground plus a rushing touchdown. I still don't think he's a long-term NFL QB, and I don't know how repeatable even half of this performance is, but in week 15, he gets the Bears, who give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing QBs. So if you want to roll with Shedeur, he at least has a solid matchup next week. Let's now look at the running backs that I'd be putting claims in for this week. Blake Corum needs to be owned, as it seems like he and Kyren Williams are completely splitting the backfield work for the Rams. It has been like this recently, but Kyren's drives were going longer, but in week 14, they both ate. Corum averaged over 10 yards per carry for the second straight week, and he found the end zone twice. He's one of the top handcuffs with very significant standalone value. Jalen Wright is a must-add after Devon Achane left week 14 with an injury. I'm not sure how serious this is going to be, but it is something you absolutely should monitor up until your waiver deadline. I want to point out that the Dolphins have leaned heavy into the run game the last few weeks, and Jalen Wright got 24 carries this past weekend. The Dolphins get the Steelers, Bengals, and Buccaneers in the next 3, so he could be a league winner depending on Achane's injury. Ollie Gordon could be an add too if you want to get another piece of this backfield. Devin Singletary is someone to monitor because Tyrone Tracy left their last game before the bye with an injury. Singletary stepped in and he finished as the RB7 on the week. The Giants get the Commanders in week 15, which is an outstanding matchup for running backs. So again, pay attention to Tracy's injury status. If he were to miss, Singletary is an absolute must-add. Chris Rodriguez only scored 5 fantasy points in week 14, but he had the most rushes of any Washington running back. The Commanders get the Giants, Eagles, and Cowboys in their next 3, which are great matchups for RBs. Rodriguez should be owned heading into the fantasy playoffs. And lastly, this is your weekly Tyler Algier mention. He's one of the top handcuffs in the league with some standalone value. In week 14, he saw 11 rushes once again, and he even caught 2 passes. Moving over to the wide receiver position, my first add of the week is Jaden Reed. In Reed's first game since week 2, he touched the ball 6 times, which was the most of any Packers wide receiver. He had 4 catches and 2 rush attempts. There are a lot of mouths to feed in Green Bay, and he only plays on 3 wide receiver sets, but he should be rostered as part of a good Packers offense. Luther Burden had his 4th straight game of 5 or more targets, catching 4 passes for 67 yards, and notched his first double-digit fantasy performance since week 3. We would have liked to see more out of him in Rome Odunse's absence, but the Bears' passing game isn't anything special right now. He is worth an add because the targets are there, but I don't know if that breakout game is coming, as I once predicted. Jerry Jeudy posted his second top 20 fantasy performance this season, mainly due to a 60-yard catch-and-run touchdown. But like Shedeur, he takes on the Bears next week, who will allow the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers. I'm not sure if this performance can happen again, but the matchup is a good one for Jerry Jeudy. Rashid Shaheed had his best game as a Seahawk, seeing 5 targets, catching 4 of them for 67 yards. He also added a return touchdown, which is a nice bonus. You probably would still like to see more out of him before you're starting him, but he could be a solid add this week. Ryan Flournoy is a deep add due to CeeDee Lamb's injury. Flournoy has games with 9 and 13 targets this season, both of those being without CeeDee. Dallas doesn't have a great matchup for wide receivers in the next two, getting the Vikings and the Chargers, but Flournoy could help wide receiver needy teams, considering how much the Cowboys like to pass. John Mechie is worth a look too. He's had 3 straight games of 7 or more targets. The last 2 haven't translated into many fantasy points, but he has a good schedule ahead getting the Jaguars, Saints, and Patriots. Garrett Wilson may be returning soon though, so that's something to keep an eye on as well. Shamir DK has seen 7 or more targets in 2 of his last 3 games, catching 5 passes in each of those. Alec Iomanor was active this past week, but DK still saw 8 targets. The Titans get the 49ers next week, which is a solid matchup for the passing game. He could be a deep streamer if you need the help. So now let's jump over to the tight end position. Colston Loveland's ownership is still under 60%, even though he has seen 4 or more targets in every game since week 7. With Cole Kmet active, he's only playing right around 60% of the snaps though. Regardless, he's had solid production with 6 top 20 finishes in his last 9 games and 3 top 12 finishes. He should be rostered if you need tight end help. Isaiah Likely has had back-to-back games with 6 targets and exactly 12.5 fantasy points, which is good for 2 top 12 finishes. The Ravens have a very good schedule for tight ends, getting the Bengals, Patriots, and Packers in the next 3. The obvious issue is that Mark Andrews is also there, but I think Likely is playable in good matchups, which he does have. Colby Parkinson has 4 top 12 finishes in his last 5 games, and not so coincidentally, he has caught a touchdown in each of those 4. He is very touchdown dependent, but he plays on a good offense that likes to pass the ball at the goal line, so he's a deeper option if you need it. Mason Taylor had his first double-digit fantasy performance since week 8, catching 5 passes for 51 yards. I am not sure how the QB situation affected him, with Tyrod Taylor leaving with an injury, but the Jets get the Jaguars next week, which is a great matchup for tight ends as they allow the second most fantasy points to the position of any team in the NFL. And finally, some defenses I'm looking to target this week are the Eagles versus the Raiders, the 49ers versus the Titans, the Jaguars versus the Jets, the Bears versus the Browns, the Texans versus the Cardinals, and the Buccaneers versus the Falcons, with each of these defenses playing at home. Thank you guys for watching this video, and thank you guys for the support on the last one. It is my best video to date. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment any questions you have.